Who is the world's most trustworthy company? Well, back in 2024, Newsweek teamed up with Statista to try and answer exactly that question. Their answers? You'll have to wait and see. We'll get to those a little bit later on. One of the things that is going to matter hugely for us is when they report on which company is the most trustworthy company in the world, how did they find that out? Okay, so let's have a little bit of a dig into what they did, the sorts of things that they worked through, whether they were actually asking the right questions at all, and then at the end we will get to the question, who is the most trusted company in the world? It's not who I thought it was. But pause the video now and drop me a comment down below. Who do you think is going to come out as the most trustworthy company in the world? And I'm afraid we're going to have to restrict this to just the electronics companies. So who do you think it's going to be? Okay, so as I said, Newsweek teamed up with Statista to do some research into which company in the world was the most trustworthy. What did they do? Well, if we have a little bit of a look at some of the reporting in the methodologies, we can see that they conducted research looking at businesses in 23 different industries spanning 20 different countries. Okay, so when they say the most trustworthy company in the world, what they actually mean is the most trustworthy company in one of these 23 different industries in those 20 countries. So perhaps a little bit of an overblown claim out of the gate there, but we can forgive them that, I'm sure. So moving on, they then listed companies with revenue of over 500 million US dollars. So this is the most trustworthy big companies by some measure of big. But fine. So that's the target that they're looking at. So from within those companies, who is the most trustworthy? Now, as we can see here on page 5 of the methodology, it's all very exciting, they looked at 3 dimensions of trust across the survey. And they've surveyed very large numbers of participants, loads of evaluations, so the data looks like it's going to be lovely and robust. But if we look at the right-hand side here, we actually get the detailing of the evaluation criteria. And here I think it's worth just spending a few moments to explore exactly what they did. Okay, so the first thing that they asked people about was a general viewpoint. In general, I trust this company. That looks like a question about trust. Brilliant, okay. And they then moved on to the viewpoint of a potential customer. And as you can see there, we've got things like, I trust this company to treat me fairly. I trust this company's products and services. That's all fantastic. One question we might ask ourselves though is, why those probes? So to explain myself, I think that they're absolutely right to identify cases that are interesting as being of the form, I trust this company to do a particular thing. If I'm thinking about trust from a customer point of view, that's probably something I care very deeply about. But they fixed on some very particular things in their criteria. Treat me fairly, products and services. If there's a complaint, I trust that it would be addressed in full. And I trust the company's advertising and communication claims. But there are other things that I might trust a company to do. I might trust a company to give me value for money. They're not asking about that. Why not? Anyway, I don't want to suggest that they've got the wrong criteria. I just want to express a little note of uncertainty as to why they've picked those exact criteria. But generally, right, this is looking okay, subject to one caveat that we'll come back to. Moving on to the point of view of a particular investor, here I think things start to look a little bit more funky. So the viewpoint of a potential investor, I believe this company would be a good long-term investment. Is that focused on trust? I don't know. It's not asking directly about trust. Coming on though to the last section, this is the viewpoint of a potential employee. These don't seem to be asking about trust at all. I believe this company treats its employees fairly. Great. Is that to do with trust? I'm not sure. And we can see similar sorts of concerns with the other questions. Now put a pin in all of that, because I think it's actually going to get a little bit more complicated as we bounce through. But just go back to those first questions that were explicitly framed on trust. In general, I trust this company. I trust this company to treat me fairly as a customer. Those questions were really focusing on whether or not we trust the company to do things. And the questions for the investors and the employees no longer seem to be focused on that. Bumping along to the next page though, here, seemingly from nowhere, methodologically we have the introduction of social listening. And as they say, social listening is defined as the process of identifying and assessing what is being said about a company on the internet. And that will give you a sense of whether the sorts of things that people are saying are generally positive or generally negative. But they aren't questions about trust. And this whole survey is supposed to be geared at demonstrating trustworthiness to us. And it's really hard to see a tight connection between the questions that they're asking and trustworthiness. Okay, and then on to how they calculated the overall score. And I love this. So we've got this weighting: 40% customer trust, 40% investor trust, 20% employee trust. Going into a survey, a big chunk, which is worth 80, and then this social listening bit getting 20% on the end. Why those ratios? So we're after a measure of just how trustworthy are these companies. Apparently this is the golden trustworthiness score, because if you change those ratings, those weightings, you will get different answers to the question, who is the most trustworthy company in the world? Or the most trustworthy company in those 20 countries that has a turnover of however many $100 million it was. Why think that that's the correct weighting for measuring company trustworthiness? I have no idea. It looks completely arbitrary to me. And there's nothing that I can see in the methodology to justify it. So if it isn't arbitrary, it just remains a mystery. Now, before we get to the big reveal, which I absolutely promise is coming, I will tell you who is the most trustworthy company in 2024, most trustworthy electronics company. One more worry with this. What they're purporting to measure is the world's most trustworthy company. Just let's sit with that for 1 second before we reveal the answer. Trustworthiness, that's a property that agents, companies, whatever, have, and it's our deservingness of trust. How much do we merit trust? Go back to some of those detailed evaluation criteria that we're asking directly about trust. So for instance, I trust this company to treat me fairly as a customer. Now that's, do you in fact trust this company to do something? It's not asking a question about whether or not the company deserves your trust. It's asking about whether or not you would trust it. Now, trustworthiness and whether or not you trust something are fundamentally different. For example, you might think that a con artist is fundamentally untrustworthy. They are exactly the kind of person who you should not trust. And yet, every year, hundreds, thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are duped by some confidence trickster in one way or another. So these are just not the same things. And we should not be claiming that whether or not you would or do in fact trust a company is a measure of whether they are deserving of your trust. So all of those questions that I said that actually are at least asking about trust in the first part of the survey, for sure they're asking about trust, but they aren't asking about trustworthiness. And this is supposed to be a measure of the most trustworthy companies in the world. In contrast, we said that those questions that were being asked about from the viewpoint of a potential investor or a potential employee, those actually might be digging into the traits that would make a company deserving of our trust. They might. They also might not, because what we haven't got here is any kind of theoretical or empirical framework that demonstrates that the kinds of traits that they're actually exploring really are the ones that make those companies trustworthy. Whatever is going on in this survey, fun as it is and hugely entertaining, I'm not sure that it has anything to do with trustworthiness. Or at least if it does, it's really not clear exactly what they're articulating. Okay, so the grand reveal that you've all been waiting for, possibly, if you've got this far through the video. The world's most trustworthy electronics company, where trustworthiness means whatever it is that they've been measuring here, is Samsung. Samsung Electronics is the answer to that question. I hope it was worth persevering all the way through to the end to find out the answer to that question. That said, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I guess if you're from Newsweek or Statista, perhaps you haven't. Nonetheless, I hope you have, and I trust all of you to do very careful surveying work, exploring trust in your own lives. Until next time, stay suitably trusting.